Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Chairman Dow. We are here to discuss our financial outlook as a city government, to reflect on where we've been, where we stand now, and where we are headed. This time last year, we were gearing up for what was easily one of the most challenging budgets in Chicago's history. We intentionally called it our pandemic budget because every aspect of our revenues and thus our fiscal health was dramatically and negatively affected by COVID-19. Our shortfall, which was massive, and our forecast reflected the largest budget gap in history. Simply put, we were hurting. We had a steep hill to climb and no easy choices to get to a balanced budget. But we used that same resolve that we had used through the pandemic. We did not shy away from hard choices. We made the tough calls to close that shortfall, and we emphasized the need for fiscal discipline. We did not take the politically easy, but ultimately disastrous decisions that many urged. Drain our reserves, the rating agencies be damned. Cut services in a time of pain and great need among our most vulnerable. Defund our police department despite the rise in violence, nor choose options that would have further burdened our businesses or driven them out of the city altogether. We did not take the politically expedient path of least resistance. Instead, in order to overcome the significant challenges and obstacles, we took the moment for what it was, an opportunity to make meaningful, transformational change in our communities and the lives of our residents through strategic investments and dynamic programming. Instead of succumbing to the pressure, we did the exact opposite by tackling these issues head-on and getting to work. We were forced to do it without any help from the former federal administration. We made important catalytic investments which reflected our values of equity and inclusion. We made place-based investments and investments in our people that continue to propel us along an economic recovery that left no one behind. Regarding our place-based investments, we notably created a long-term capital plan, the first of its kind in years, which provides multi-year resources to repair roads, bridges, and tunnels throughout Chicago. This commitment allows us to make multi-year commitments which enhance planning and efficiencies over multiple construction seasons instead of lurching from year to year without a long-term plan. This $3.7 billion plan has already produced hundreds of good-paying jobs, union jobs, and we have brought needed infrastructure improvements to neighborhoods all across the city. And we helped to reduce our heat dome by planting hundreds of new trees in neighborhoods and arterial streets. Seems like a little thing, but we know the dangers of climate change and how important trees are in an urban environment to offset the dangers of arising from too much concrete and asphalt. And communities benefit enormously, not just from the shade, but from the beauty that the trees provide. Even during a pandemic year, we continued to make good on our signature economic development program, Invest Southwest. We continue to leverage public and private partnerships with tangible investments in Bronzeville, Inglewood, Austin, Auburn Gresham, and other neighborhoods. We will invest $750 million to transform, beautify, revitalize neighborhoods with retail, affordable housing, streetscapes, green spaces, and more. We also continued breaking ground and cutting ribbons on projects funded through the Neighborhood Opportunity Fund, which awards grants to projects that will have a catalytic impact on our neighborhoods and lead to the construction or rehabilitation of new and existing public commercial spaces. And understanding that our residents were still hurting because of these challenges exacerbated by the pandemic, we made investments that brought relief to individuals, families, and neighborhoods. We supported our youth through programmatic investments like our first-of-its-kind Chicago Youth Services Corps, which offers young people year-round opportunities to serve their communities even during the pandemic. One Summer Chicago, a youth employment program that hired 20,000 young people in 6-week virtual paid work experience last summer, making it the largest summer employment program in the entire country. Chicago Connected, a $50 million program aimed at eliminating the digital divide for CPS students and their families by providing free access to Wi-Fi and broadband. We continue to build on investments in community-based mental health and wellness resources. All told, since I took office, we have tripled our investments in this vital area, and just this year have served over 500% more residents in need. Yes, that's right, over a 500% increase in patients served. Our residents have great needs for affordable housing, which is why we have been relentless in working to address homelessness and provide more affordable housing for vulnerable residents. For example, in September 2020, we used $35 million in CARES Act funding and a $1.3 million investment from Chicago Funders Together to End Homelessness to rapidly house residents experiencing homelessness. Over 1,000 housing insecure individuals have been housed since the pandemic began. And recently, in May of this year, I unveiled a plan to boost the number of affordable homes across Chicago, which is designed to give developers incentives to build in parts of the city where there is little affordable housing or where longtime residents are vulnerable to displacement. We did not let the pandemic derail us, even though it could have easily done so. We continued to deliver for our residents. And we did all of this while continuing to fight the pandemic itself. Regarding our COVID-19 mitigation efforts, we leaned into important partnerships with community stakeholders built through the Racial Equity Rapid Response Team to make our vaccine distribution efforts the most equitable and inclusive in the nation, bar none. We prioritize our healthcare workers, our elderly, and those in neighborhoods most devastated by this deadly virus. And let's be clear, the virus is not gone, and our work is not complete. But I am extraordinarily proud of our residents who stayed home to save lives and then masked up and vaxxed up. My fellow Chicagoans, when the going got tough, we dug in our heels and fought tooth and nail to not only get over immense challenges we were facing, but we did not shy away from laying the foundation to vanquish them once and for all. That hard but essential work absolutely must continue. We need to continue putting in place stable, long-term supports that will allow our city and our residents not only to survive, but thrive long after this pandemic is over. One of the harsh lessons from the pandemic is neglect is not cost-free. If you avert your eyes from the hard truths, you will still pay, and frankly, more harshly than if you make the tough choices on the front end. When we are talking about life and death, there is no kicking the can down the road. We learned that. We learned that lesson when decades of neglect showed up in ICU rooms and in the morgue. You know this because you live this, but it bears repeating. We've had far too many dark days and long nights of late. To date, we've lost over 5,600 Chicagoans to this virus. And I hope you join me in continuing to pray to the good Lord that these souls are welcome home and that He watches over their families and their loved ones. We've also experienced pain and loss of a different kind. The loss of a job, the loss of a business, the loss of health, the loss of life, due to our other pandemics of gun violence and opioid abuse. Make no mistake, our lives, our existence is still in transition. And it is up to us, each and every one of us, to chart a new course, a different direction, because there is no going back. And that is precisely why the last thing we need right now is to be divided. In this moment, our city is once again grappling with long-standing, or more accurately, long-simmering issues. Issues that the cynical may exploit for a variety of reasons. But issues that we dare not continue to let fester, or they will rip us apart. Top of mind, given recent events, are issues around community safety and policing. Sadly, the battle lines have been drawn. Some say that we do not do enough for the police. We do not respect them, and that we're handcuffing them from doing their jobs. While others say we do too much for the police, and that we never hold them accountable for what they do, particularly in black and brown neighborhoods. This divisive rhetoric and debate doesn't solve any crime, doesn't feed anyone who is hungry, doesn't house anyone who needs shelter. But what it does do, exploited by those who are cynical, is keep us from focusing on what we need to do to heal our city to be able to move forward. I say again what I said this past weekend. Stop. All of you, all of us. Just stop. This constant strife is exactly what we do not need in this moment or any moment. Instead, we need to come together to find healing and prepare to take down the common enemies threatening the safety and well-being of our communities and our residents. To paraphrase the great poet Robert Frost, the only way forward is through. And in this moment, the only way through is together. We sacrificed and we endured, but nonetheless, we persevered and were able to make lasting, positive changes across each of our 77 neighborhoods against a backdrop of this terrible pandemic. Let this be a lesson that we carry forward. That was no small feat, nor was it by mistake. Rather, it is the direct result of our hard work and our unbreakable commitment to rooting equity and inclusion at the heart of everything that we do. As a result of this incredible work and partnerships, we have indeed begun to turn the corner on this terrible crisis and are still poised for a strong, robust, and equitable recovery. We know this is true for several reasons. For example, in July 2020, we became the first city to publish a comprehensive economic recovery plan detailing our pathway out of the pandemic, a plan that has been called upon and used by other cities across the country. At several points throughout the summer and fall of 2020, our city was the most open big city in the country. And we still have the highest vaccination rate among adults and the most equitable vaccine distribution system in the country. And back of June of this year, when we opened on June 11th, we became the largest fully and safely reopened city in the country. And that's because of the hard work of all of you. It's important as we look to the fiscal future to note a very important point about our economy. We are truly the most diverse economy in the country. That means we are not overly dependent on one sector or another. And while at times it may not have felt like it, it's helped mitigate against the worst shocks of the pandemic-induced economic meltdown. And you don't have to take my word for it. Businesses are validating why a bet on Chicago is the right bet. Despite a global pandemic, 114 businesses and counting have chosen to set up shop or expand their operations here in Chicago just in the past year. That's 47 companies that have opened a brand new location in Chicago and 67 that expanded within city limits. These new businesses, like Kimberly-Clark, that makes so many paper products that we rely upon on a daily basis. These businesses could locate literally anywhere in the world, but they chose Chicago. These companies range from financial services and life sciences to food and agriculture to technology and transportation and logistics and many more. One of these companies, Nature's Find, which develops microbe-based protein for meat and dairy substitutes, is located in the back of the yards neighborhood, meaning the food of the future is being produced in the heart of the old Chicago stockyards. Nature's Find joins 16 other businesses who have heeded our call and opened in Invest Southwest corridors. Folks, that's 114 pro-Chicago decisions, all of whom are betting on Chicago in this year alone. I should also mention that our beleaguered hotel, hospitality, convention business is also rebounding. As of mid-July, our hotels were up about 173 weekly rooms demanded. That's over 56% occupancy. The Chicago Auto Show successfully staged a great show in July, and bookings for large conventions are coming back. In addition, many more hotels are seeing sold-out dates as business travel and special event bookings are on the rise. These improving economic indicators are important markers. But we know that we are still on our journey to economic recovery, and so prudence and fiscal responsibility remain very important. Now, let's talk specifics about the additional obligations for the current 2021 fiscal year, as well as the projected 2022 budget gap. Since the pandemic began here in approximately March 2020, our current estimates are that the City of Chicago has lost $1.7 billion in revenues as a result of COVID and the restrictions. Through a lot of hard work, the city worked that revenue loss impact on our budget down to $950 million without major layoffs and reduction in city services. And I've got to give credit to the ladies who are joining me here on the stage and their teams. Susie Park, our budget director, Reshma Soni, our financial director, and Jenny Bennett, our chief financial officer. These ladies and their teams have worked their tails off, tirelessly, long hours for the past year plus to make sure that we had our financial footing strong. And I want to thank all three of you for all of your hard work and those of your teams. Through a lot of hard work, you can clap. Recall that former federal administration left cities like Chicago high and dry when it came to addressing our catastrophic revenue losses. In the absence of federal supports, our proposal that we presented to the City Council and was approved was to address the remaining $950 million loss to borrow through scoop and toss and debt restructuring. In the absence of clarity from the federal funding, this was the only tool available to us to prevent significant job loss and reductions in city services. In the meantime, we adamantly advocated for flexible federal funding to recover revenue loss. This was a point of contention, as you may recall, with previous iterations of the federal stimulus package not allowing municipalities to recover from revenue loss. Fortunately, with the new administration, the Biden team rolled out a package which provided the city with $1.9 billion in flexible funding, which included the ability to recover for revenue losses incurred. I'm also happy to report that the city has also experienced better than expected revenues of about $210 million. This will address a portion of the revenue loss described above. As a result, we will only need $775 million to address the previous shortfalls in 2020 and 2021 that allow the city to continue critical services and preserve jobs in the middle of the worst pandemic and economic crisis in a century. Also, the city has come to terms on a tentative agreement with the Fraternal Order of Police. This is an 8-year contract to address the 4 years that had lapsed on the old contract, plus an additional 4 years. This contract was structured in a financially prudent way and provides cost certainty for the city through 2024. The cost of this contract will be about $275 million in 2021, which will be funded largely through savings from a refinancing given the current low interest rate environment. Now, let's turn to the 2022 budget gap. With concerns about the Delta variant rising, I don't have to remind you that we were still in the midst of a pandemic. During budget season last year, we were able to see the pinprick of light at the end of the tunnel. And now that we haven't fully left that tunnel, we can see daylight in a way that we haven't seen since March of 2020. Consequently, our gap for this coming year will reflect that reality. As reported in our budget forecast, which we released today, our projected gap for 2022 is $733 million. For context, our gap last year was $1.2 billion, and a part of what we called our pandemic budget. Doing the math, this $733 million projected gap for 2022 is 40% less than the projected gap for this year, 2021, meaning that we have shifted from a pandemic budget to a recovery budget. We still have hard work to do in order to close this gap, but this figure is yet another great indication that our city is fiscally bouncing back from this crisis. It is also indicative of another accomplishment we've been working towards. In 2022, we will climb our pension ramp, and for the first time in our city's history, all 4 pension funds will be paid on an actuarially determined basis. This is great progress, folks. It was just 2 years ago that we faced a $1 billion pension ramp, which was owed in 4 years. So once again, all signs are that we are indeed turning the corner of this fiscal crisis, but recovering from its financial fallout is only half the battle. We must also recover from the social fallout as well. Looking beyond finances and retaining our focus on making meaningful investments in the lives of our residents and the communities they call home. We must do both. That's what this moment calls for. This moment thus demands that we take bold and transformative steps. We must be clear-eyed about the whole picture, the fiscal realities and forecasts, as well as the continued daily pain points of our residents. Now, today is not the day that I will make proposals about how we will spend the unprecedented $1.8 billion in American Rescue Plan funds. That plan will come in mid-September when we lay out our proposed budget for 2022. But it's worth noting what I believe are some very important principles that must guide what has already been a very robust discussion about how to spend those precious dollars. Folks, this is a once-in-a-generation amount of money for a once-in-a-generation crisis, meaning we aren't going to see money like this ever again. We have one time to use it and get it right, and I'm determined that we do just that. To spend every penny of these ARP funds without any regard to the long-term fiscal consequences would be utterly irresponsible, ineffective, and leave us with nothing to support ourselves. God forbid another crisis strikes our city. We know that planning only for the short term simply doesn't work. and all too often creates other catastrophes down the line. To give an example, look no further than the 2009 parking meter deal, which I think is safe to say was the worst municipal finance deal of all time. This infamous deal provided the city with an upfront cash payment of $1.16 billion to alleviate the then budget challenges. But that money was spent in 3 years because of a failure to make hard but necessary choices to address structural fiscal challenges and look down the road at the fiscal crisis that were clearly looming on the horizon. That disastrous deal also privatized street parking for the next 75 years, essentially giving the Chicago Parking Meters Company a monopoly over the system and forcing our city to lose out on a huge stream of revenue for decades. It is a decidedly one-sided deal, favoring the vendor and not the city, and as a consequence, over the life of this deal so far, the city has had to pay the vendor over $100 million in true-ups since its effective date. The parking meter incident is just the beginning. Because of the politically expedient but poor choices that were made about how to use the parking meter deal proceeds, the predictable further shortfalls were addressed through a series of scoop and tosses and draining reserve funds. The expression that those who fail to learn the lessons of history are bound to repeat it resonates when we think about that history. We must learn from the lessons of the past, continue to be fiscal fiduciaries of precious tax dollars, and not simply live for the moment without any regard for the future. I am determined that we will learn from the past and make better, smarter decisions that don't plunge us into another fiscal crisis in the out years. The first business at hand is addressing this 2021 shortfall. This year, just like last year, we have identified a number of smart solutions to this year's shortfall and next year's projected gap, and let me provide you with some details. First and foremost, to make up for this year's shortfall, we plan to use our state and local revenue replacement. And let me take you on a trip down memory lane when we first received Coronavirus Relief Fund, or CRF funding, under the prior administration. One of the biggest pushbacks from cities across the country was that the money could only be used for COVID mitigation efforts. Therefore, none of it could be used for the $886 million of revenue loss that our city had incurred to date at that point, which only grew, as you heard. During that time, I repeatedly called for the federal government to allow us to be able to pay basic city services. And ultimately, after President Biden was elected, the federal government came through with this stimulus package that allows cities to use these dollars for revenue loss. Our intention now is to use some of our ARP dollars to cover the significant revenue loss suffered by the city. By doing so, we will be able to continue maintaining critical city services our residents rely upon every single day. Now, when it comes to closing the 2022 budget gap, we will be looking internally first for structural solutions, like we've done every year since I became mayor. We will be working to identify efficiencies to be even better stewards of our residents' tax dollars, and these efforts will be guided, of course, by our values of equity and inclusion. This includes looking at all existing contracts to make sure that they are needed, and if so, ensuring we are getting the benefit of our bargain. We will also further scrutinize contractual relationships to make sure that we are doing business with people who share our values around equity and inclusion, and making sure that Chicago residents are first in line for the jobs that are produced by those contracts. For months now, we have also engaged with residents and stakeholders all over the city to better understand at a hyper-local level the continued needs of our residents. Lots of money has flowed through Chicago since the pandemic hit, but we know that there are still significant needs that are unmet. And some folks simply weren't touched by those dollars, and they need to be. That work of engagement and listening is ongoing. But some clear themes have arisen, themes that must guide our decision-making on how to use the ARP funds to set our residents up for a robust recovery. Let me share those themes with you. First and foremost, we remain diligent around continued resources to mitigate against the ongoing, and let me emphasize, ongoing pandemic. COVID-19 is still here. It is real and remains incredibly deadly. The Delta variant punishes the unvaccinated. Folks, when 97% of the patients getting really sick and showing up in hospitals, and when 97% of the deaths in our city are also among the unvaccinated, what I say is do not delay. Get vaxxed. The vaccine is safe, it is free, and it remains widely available. So in our 2022 budget, we will continue to invest in proven strategies to educate and connect our residents to care and the vaccine. We also know and have heard loud and clear that residents must not just feel safe, they must in fact be safe. We will therefore continue to invest in efforts to disrupt the root causes of community violence in all of its forms and support our police department. Every conversation that I have been in or listened to, people also raise the urgent need to invest in meaningful opportunities for our young people and their families to thrive, and I wholeheartedly agree. When our residents, especially our young people, have access to the tools they need to chase their dreams and reach their God-given potential, they are less likely to find themselves in unfavorable situations and more likely to achieve success in the short and long term. Success, however, doesn't have to start later in life. And in fact, in order for our residents to have the best shot at success, we must ensure that they have access to opportunity from birth. So cradle to career and college investments all throughout our residents' lifetime is critically important. Another clear theme that has arisen from our community engagement conversations is a need to use this unprecedented ARP funding to holistically invest in communities that have been hit the hardest by the health, safety, and economic impacts of the pandemic. As I often say, temporary scaffolding is not going to help our residents, especially in our most vulnerable, amongst our most vulnerable. We have to make sure that they recover from this torturous time. We need to eliminate the systemic inequities at the root of our city institutions and practices so that they can succeed long after the pandemic is over. We need to look and target additional relief to businesses that are undersupported or completely unsupported by past initiatives and investments. And furthermore, we must consider place-based investments around the following quality of life pillars, which includes job and wealth creation, revitalizing our market corridors, investing in our community spaces and parks, and providing safe and affordable housing. And do all of this in ways that complement the already historic investments and supports that we have made to date. Investments for our hardest hit communities will allow us to create even more of a social and economic safety net for those who are struggling and send home the message that everyone living in Chicago, regardless of their circumstances, deserves to have access to a safe place to lay their head, an affordable home to raise a family in, and a good-paying job that keeps the lights on and food on the table. Another key theme that has arisen is building on our city's vitality. As soon as COVID hit our city, we went to work to not only protect the health and well-being of our residents, but also the health and well-being of our economy. As I highlighted earlier, in April 2020, we brought together leaders from all across the business and philanthropic and community-based sectors, experts, to stand up a COVID-19 recovery task force, which then published its report in July 2020. This detailed our city's pathway out of the pandemic. This pathway must be one that allows Chicago to reopen, to rebuild, and become better than ever before, as well as to allow us to meet the needs of residents and promote population and inclusive economic growth. We will be able to accelerate this mission by making investments in efficient and effective government to improve systems, infrastructure, and fiscal measures. This includes budget debt relief, maintaining and improving city services, and deploying navigators to ensure residents and businesses have access to the supports that we are providing. When we have an efficient and effective government, we are able to better provide city services and better navigate deficit challenges, thus ensuring that our city is able to run smoothly, efficiently, and to prosper, all on behalf of our residents. These are the broad areas of investment residents and other stakeholders have been telling us that they would like to see. A lot of very solid ideas and innovations is coming from tables and discussions led by residents who have come to the table to offer their ideas. We have and will continue to listen. I also want to talk about how we will address some immediate needs now and not wait for the passage of the 2022 budget. Today I'm announcing a set of additional investments we will make in what we've been calling our COVID-19 bridge funding, because it will build a bridge to the investments we plan on making with the ARP dollars. This is a nearly $40 million set of investments. It's residual from our CRF funds, which again were initially restricted on use to COVID-related expenditures only. However, because we have already used other funds for those needs, we were prudent with the CRF funds we did use, and we now have additional federal dollars that need to be expended or obligated by the end of this year. We intend to use this leftover funding for the following additional expenditures: $5 million more for youth services, $9 million more for small business assistance, $9 million more for student re-engagement grants and navigation to services, and $14 million more for child care assistance. This additional funding, as well as the investments we make with ARP dollars, will help our residents get back to work and climb above this crisis on the ladder of upward mobility. We've been through a lot over the last 17 months, but time and again we've been able to rise above and make significant headway in overcoming the challenges that have threatened to slow us down or turn us around. That's because of willingness to work together, Mayor with City Council members, but also with our residents and other stakeholders. So just like in previous budgets, community engagement has been and continues to be a significant and meaningful part of our budget process this year. In early summer, we started listening sessions with sector stakeholders to hear from people working in a variety of spaces, from early childhood to the arts, the faith community, and violence prevention, just to name a few. Then we broadened our lens and began a series of public discussions. Those started last Saturday, August 7th, when we held the first of 3 budget engagement forums for residents to weigh in on what they want to see reflected in the budget. And there will be more. 2 more today, 2 more this week. 1 today on August 11th and another tomorrow on August 12th. Through these various forms of engagement, we will be able to create a budget that addresses the wants, the needs, and concerns of our communities, not just now, but going into the future. So I urge everyone tuning in to make sure that their voices are heard at one of these events. In the meantime, we will be gearing up for the 2022 budget to be introduced to City Council next month in September and hopeful passage at the end of October. I want to thank my friend and colleague, Alderwoman Pat Dow, who is the chairman of the Budget Committee, who probably better than any other member of City Council understands the necessity of making sure that our budgeting process reflects the needs of our residents. She has already put in a significant amount of work to listen to her colleagues and solicit input and information, and she will be on the front lines of this work. So we owe you, Pat, a debt of gratitude for your selfless service to our city, the work that you've done through the Budget Committee, and more work to come. So thank you. In the face of all the darkness that we've endured, we've continued to see tremendous courage, strength, and resilience time and time again across our entire city, among our youth, our workers, our business owners, our arts and culture community, and thousands of unsung heroes who literally do the Lord's work every day because of their commitment, the service over self, because they love the city and they love making our residents' needs be met. We've learned so much on this journey with COVID-19, and this budget season gives us yet another opportunity to use what we've learned to create a better Chicago for all. I look forward to standing with my colleagues in the City Council, but more importantly with the residents of the city, shoulder to shoulder, to continue this work. People are hurting, people are fearful, but people are also hopeful and optimistic because they believe in themselves and they believe in the city, and they know through the fire that we've been through, the difficult times over this last year, that if we are united, if we put ourselves together in a position where we are linking arms and moving forward together, there is nothing that we can't do in this great city that we all call home. So thank you very much for listening. God bless you for everything that you're doing every day, and God bless our beloved city of Chicago. Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen of the press, I'm happy to take your questions at this time.
Thank you, Mayor. We're going to start with Craig Delmore, WBBM, and then we'll shift the mic towards that direction to your right.
All right. So we're going from right to left in the room. Craig,
so
go
I'm
ahead.
on the right now. But thank you, Mayor. Can you give us a sense of what the public safety budget is going to look like, since it is a subject of that much interest because of what's been happening? Is the police department going to get more money? And in connection with that, the idea of shifting some of the things that police have to handle to mental health professionals, what is that going to look like in this new budget?
Well, you've asked a number of questions. Let me see if I can take them one at a time. First and foremost, the work of diverting certain calls for service to other providers already started. You'll recall that in the budget for 2021, we launched two concepts that are being piloted. One is a co-responder model that matches up the police with social service providers, particularly mental health calls, where I think we all believe that the clinicians should be the lead, but with some police support. Also included in the 2021 budget is another kind of alternative response that has clinicians and experts, particularly in mental health and opioid calls, being the front and center of that without any police assistance. That work is ongoing. It's being led by the Chicago Department of Public Health. So we'll have a lot of data and information from those pilots that will certainly inform that work. But it's certainly my hope and intention that the City Council will agree with me that we need to keep funding those alternatives. You've asked the question about the public safety budget, which I take to mean the police department budget. So with that understanding, yes, it's my expectation that the police department budget will increase. No question. We have to. We have to make sure that we are continuing to provide resources to recruit the next generation of police officers, and in particular make sure that we're doing that recruitment in a way that reflects the diversity of our city. So I expect that the police department itself will recommend a more fulsome recruiting process and team of permanent officers that go across the country to recruit the best and the brightest talent, in addition to making sure that we mine the opportunities here in Chicago for talent. We haven't done that before, but we will do that, and that will be part of the proposal. We also need to do more and I think this very difficult week has told us that we need to do a lot more to increase the resources devoted to the health and wellness of our police officers. We increased the number of clinicians that work with our officers from a paltry 3 to over 13, but it's very clear that more needs to be done. I've seen some preliminary ideas from the superintendent and his team, and we need to flesh those out. But I think overall, I will present a budget to the City Council that increases resources targeted and strategic for the police department because those needs are absolutely there.
Megan Hickey, CBS 2, Mayor.
Hi, good morning. Along the same vein, I did want to ask
I'm just going to ask you to speak up a little bit.
Sorry about that.
Go ahead.
Along the same vein, I wanted to ask about the ShotSpotter contract. As you know, there was a very critical study back in the spring, followed by some rallies, some protests asking for the city to cancel its contract with ShotSpotter. I know when we asked you about it, I think in May, you said you thought it was a beneficial technology, but it should be discussed, that there was room for some discussion. Fast forward to now, the original contract was slated to expire in just a few days, but we're learning that it actually had been extended back in December at the request of the Chicago Police Department. So now it won't expire for another 2 years. I didn't know if you could comment, did you know that it won't expire for another 2 years? Do you still think there's room for discussion, and what goes from here?
Well, you may or may not know this about me, but I'm an old procurement geek at heart. I spent a lot of time and continue to as mayor looking at our contracts, making sure that we're getting the benefit of our bargain, and really holding the departments in our Department of Procurement Services accountable so that we don't just let contracts and then they roll on and on without any real oversight. So the ShotSpotter contract obviously is one, it's a large contract, it's one that's important, but here's what I know based upon the diligence that we've done to date and more to come. ShotSpotter, when it works, is a game changer. Just think about what our technology and our abilities were prior to ShotSpotter, which meant we were wholly reliant upon calls for service to let us know when there was a shooting that had occurred in one area or another. What ShotSpotter allows us to do with the camera technology that we now have across the city is not only to know that a shot has happened, but be able to pinpoint it and direct resources to the exact site of the shots. I will tell you that has saved lives. That has allowed us to find individuals who are wreaking havoc in neighborhoods, to identify cars where those individuals are shooting from. So there has been an enormous exponential benefit from pairing that ShotSpotter technology with our camera system. ShotSpotter alone isn't enough. I get this question a lot from mayors across the country who want to understand what our experience has been. But nonetheless, we still have to hold them accountable. And we need to make sure that the technology is working. That is the charge that I've given to the superintendent and the others who are responsible for that contract. So we're going to hold them accountable. We have to get away from the days where we sign up for a contract and hope for the best, but don't scrutinize whether or not we were actually getting the benefit of our bargain. We have to change that mindset around entirely, whether it's ShotSpotter or whether it's office supplies. Our taxpayer dollars have to be spent in an appropriate way, and we've got to make sure that we are being diligent on these contracts, particularly contracts that have big dollar values and where life and death and public safety is involved.
Okay.
No other question?
Mayor, we'll go with Heather Sherrod.
Hi, Mayor.
How are you, Heather?
I'm good, thanks. Will this budget be more conservative because of the Delta variant and its spread in case that it begins to overwhelm or exceeds current projections? And is there going to be a designated sort of COVID reserve fund, or how will you address that?
Well, I think we'll address it the same way that we've addressed it before, which is to make sure that we are really clear about the data and the science and the modeling and what that tells us, so that we do have additional resources. Chairman Dow can recall we had a lot of robust discussion back in the spring of 2020 when we got the first of the CRF dollars. And there were many who believed that we should literally spend every penny at that moment. We knew that that was not going to be wise. We didn't know what the trajectory of the virus would be, but we were prepared for the worst case scenario, and that preparation has really served us well. And so we will have the same mindset in thinking about the dollars that have specifically been allocated to public health around COVID, because it's not gone. It's not going to be gone entirely for some time. And of course, our immediate focus is on getting more and more people vaccinated to make sure that this race that sometimes feels like a race against time with these mutations that are coming. The vaccines that are out on the market now are very effective against the Delta virus variant, and we see that every day. Something like 99% of the people who have gotten vaccinated with one of these vaccines have not had any infections with the virus. But we've got to be diligent. And being diligent is also being smart and making sure that we've got the resources in order to respond. If we spend every penny that has been allocated for COVID, and we had, God forbid, another catastrophic surge, then people would say, well, what happened to the mayor? Why did she do that? We've got to be smart. We've got to be prudent, and we will continue to be so.
Have you gotten a response from the Biden administration's Treasury Department on whether the city will be allowed to use American Relief Package funds to pay off the scoop and toss debt that was incurred in 2020 and 2021?
We have had a lot of conversations with people from the Biden administration, and certainly at the highest levels of the folks who are managing the ARP dollars. We've had very robust discussions with them, and obviously we participated in a comment around the draft Treasury guidance. We feel very confident that we understand what the parameters are, and we are going to abide by the Treasury guidance, which I think gives us a significant amount of flexibility.
All right, Craig Wall, ABC 7 here.
Well, Mayor, question, because everyone will always be looking ahead to the budget and will be wondering
Craig,
about...
I apologize. Yes, thank you. That's better.
Will your use of the ARP funds and will what you project the revenue to be allow you to avoid having to raise taxes, or is, based on what you're seeing now, that something you might still have to do?
No, it's our hope that we will not need to raise, and by taxes, I assume you mean property taxes. It's our hope that we will not have to use that tool.
Aaron Haggerty, Daily Line.
Hi.
Hi there.
So is it still expected that about half of the ARP money will go toward paying down debt? And how do you balance that with calls from some aldermen and, as you said, residents in the engagement forums that they want, the money going towards neighborhoods, or they want to see that money directly?
I don't think it's either or. I think it's got to be both. And that's the balance. What the specific dollar amounts are by category, we will determine through our discussions with members of the City Council in drafting the budget, but also be responsive to the needs of our residents. But I've said it in the speech, I've said it many times, we have to learn the lessons from the past. If we spend every dollar, we will be in a world of hurt. And then those same folks who are calling for spend everything now will say, but please don't do this later. We know what the horizon looks like for us in the next few years. That's our job and our responsibility. And really, again, these ladies have done a tremendous amount of work in looking at what the horizon looks like, understanding what our long-term financial obligations are, particularly around pensions, but also other expenses that are coming down the road. So we share that information with members of the City Council. We urge them to look at the bigger, larger picture, and we've got to do the right thing, which means a balance between continuing to attack our structural budget deficit, continue to make sure that we climb that ramp as we are obligated to do under state law, but also recognizing that there's real hurt in our communities, and that when we expend the dollars, it's got to be in ways that are catalytic, not just for this season, but for years to come. That's the lens through which I and our team are looking at this once-in-a-generation opportunity, and also recognizing, I said this in the speech, but I want to emphasize it again, we're not getting any more money. You see on a daily basis what's happening in Washington, D.C., how it's so difficult to get agreement on things, even when there's bipartisan consensus in the country. It's still difficult to get Washington to agree. So anyone who thinks that we can just spend and that the cavalry will come rescue us again, I don't think that's realistic. So we've got to deal with the here and now, the reality that we have in front of us, which is an incredible opportunity, to be sure. But we've got to spend this money in a way that recognizes the lessons from the past, places emphasis on being fiscal fiduciaries of our precious tax dollars. That's money coming out of hardworking men and women's pockets in our city, but also addressing those pain points that I talk about that are real and profound across a lot of neighborhoods.
Any quick grades, Mayor, right here.
Hi, Mayor.
Hey, AD.
You mentioned refinancing, including to help fund the new FOP contract. Can you tell us what borrowing and refinancing will look like in this next budget? Are we still talking diet, scoop, and toss? And can you reiterate the latest guidance from the federal government about using ARP to pay off debt?
So I will start, and then I will call up someone who's smarter on these issues than me, and that's our CFO, Jenny Bennett. I believe, based on my conversations with folks at Treasury and elsewhere, that we have a lot of flexibility to address our revenue loss needs. And as I said before, we're going to follow the guidance and the advice that we've been given about how to do that. Certainly, we're looking to other cities. A lot of other major cities like New York and LA, for example, have fiscal years that start July 1. So we have the benefit of looking at those budgets and what they've done and how they've used resources. So that's going to be important. But as I said, we're going to be very careful to use the funds in compliance with Treasury. We expect to be audited, and we expect to come up with a clean bill of health. Jenny, I don't know if you want to add any more detail. Oh, and you also asked about the FOP contract. The first tranche of that, we had allocated some monies for in the 2021 budget, and we're going to use that and refinancing, as I mentioned, to address some of the retro pay issues. Jenny.
AD, the refinancing for savings is not, I think you're referring to a scoop and toss light. There are going to be savings in every year, and debt service will be lower than the existing debt service in every year. It's a great time for the city to be in the market now. Our credit spreads have come in significantly since last year, and interest rates are very low, and we're taking advantage of low current interest rates.
And we're moving on to somewhat off topic. I'm assuming that you've asked us all whether or not we had on or off.
That's fine.
I absolutely realize this is a budget speech. No amount of money for the police department is going to bring back Officer Ella French, but could you address what happened Saturday night and the officers who turned their backs on you?
So here's what I'll say about that. By all accounts, Ella French was an incredible person, extraordinarily hardworking, and a great colleague. She exhibited, I think, all the attributes that we really want young people to do, which is dedication, commitment, hard work, service over self, a lot of sacrifice. Her mother said it, that she loved the job. There was a lot of emotion running that night. There were hundreds of officers who were there. I met and talked to many of them. And there was a lot of emotion from a range of the spectrum, from total despair to anger and rage and kind of everything in between. And that's to be expected. This is a really hard loss. A really hard loss for her unit and her team, who are themselves very young and who may be experiencing personal loss for maybe the first time in their lives. So I think that the most important thing is that we honor her service, we support her mom and her brother, and that we pray every day for the other officer who was injured and still hospitalized, and his family. His life will always be marked by that incident. So that's really what I'm focused on.
I have one more.
Yep.
And it is kind of a campaign type question, but I understand you have a fundraiser tonight. You had told the New York Times that you weren't sure what you were going to do.
No, that's not what I said. That's just not what I said. So I know that look, here's what I'm going to say. There have been people, maybe some in this room, have been writing my obituary from day one and have been piling on, trying to suggest that the world is falling apart politically for me. Here's what I know. I am focused on the job at hand, and I believe in preparation. What I said to the New York Times, if you actually listen to the entirety, because I've had people that called me to say, why are they saying you said you're not going to run? I said, I have no idea, because I didn't say that. If I were saying right now that I was running for re-election, you people in the media would be saying, oh my God, in the middle of all these crises, can you believe how craven and narcissistic the mayor is? All she cares about is herself. That would happen. I see people in here that would absolutely do that. What I said is, this is really hard. It's been really tough. And it's not a gimme. I think the fact that there are so many mayors across the country who are making the decision not to run for re-election really speaks to the moment that we're in. We are facing unprecedented challenges, unprecedented, for which we are doing our best. I am doing my best every single day. I sweat the details. I carry the burden and the load of the loss and the tragedy with me in ways that I never thought I could be possible. So yes, I am working hard every day. I'm focused on what people want me to be focused on, is how do we heal our city? How do we get through these crises? And I'm not spending every waking moment thinking about my re-election. I'm just not. There will be a time and a place for that. My wife and I and our daughter will have that conversation. We will huddle with close friends, but now's not that time. Folks, there's a whole statewide election that has to happen before that time comes for me. So yes, of course, I feel it's important for me to be prepared. And I have every expectation that we will look to the future. Our work's not done, not by a long shot. But please, have some respect for the moment that we're in. And I'm not saying you specifically, Marianne, I don't want you to think that. But we are in a moment that requires 1,000% of my focus every single day on making sure that this city can recover, that we can move through the crisis that we're in right now. That's what I'm focused on. The politics absolutely will take care of itself. But right now, in this moment, our residents need me to be the mayor of the city that's present for them. And that's what I'm doing.
Mayor, two quick questions. The first one is kind of a follow to Mary Ann's first question. Obviously, everyone was emotional. You spoke to that. It's an impossibly difficult situation at the hospital Saturday night. But is there ever an instance in which men and women who are sworn to protect the city should turn their back on the mayor of the city of Chicago? What about respect for the office, not just respect for you personally?
Look, I think that's a bigger question. And I appreciate your point. It's not about me. We are living in a time where people don't respect each other. Someone said this to me the other day. Their fear that we've lost our empathy for one another, that we've lost not just the people that are the shooters that seem to have absolutely no regard for the sanctity of life, that is really hard to fathom. You know, I thought a lot about what were the circumstances that led that young man to pull out a gun and shoot to kill uniformed officers, for the Lord's sake. It's hard to wrap your mind around those kind of individual decisions, but we're seeing it every day. But larger than that is this moment where people feel like it is their right to spew hatred at everyone that they don't agree with, or make fun and mock, usually anonymously and cowardly, from social media. Not confronting somebody directly and talking to them, but using the power of the pen and the keyboard to just spew unbelievable hate. So this is a larger question than what may have happened with 10 or 15 officers on Saturday night. It's why do we think it is okay for people to engage in such nasty, vicious talk, orally or worse, on social media, and then have it repeated by media as if it is fact and true. I've said this before. I think the media plays a very important role in our democracy. But you lose me when it's a race to the bottom, and it's all about the fight, and it's all about the conflict. I got to tell you, some of the reporting I've seen this week is just sickening. We all need to ask ourselves what we can do better to show our people everywhere that we have the capacity to be human beings again. There's a woman who died earlier this summer, and I had the privilege of speaking at her funeral. I talked to several of her friends to get some better insights on her. One who'd done tremendous things to contribute to her community, the Chinatown community notably. She's on her deathbed. She knows her days, and maybe her moments are numbered. But still, she had one wish and aspiration for us, which is that as Chicagoans, we learn to love each other and fall back in love with each other more deeply and stronger than ever. She gave us a gift, and a gift that we dare not squander. So the larger issue is people have to be better humans, better human beings. And it doesn't matter if they're police, it doesn't matter if they're an elected official or a reporter. We need to be better humans to each other.
Officers are upset that the first Deputy Superintendent, Eric Carter, they say did not wait for the bagpipers Saturday night before taking Officer French's body to the medical examiner's office. Did you know that that happened, and what do you think about that ritual being skipped?
So, thanks for listening, Taman. But I'll answer your question anyway. The reporting on that is just not true. It's just not true. With COVID protocols, the coroner has made a lot of new restrictions on what can and cannot happen at the morgue, is my understanding. I didn't know anything about this, obviously, on Saturday night. I was focused on supporting Ms. French and making sure, frankly, that the officers that were coming were getting the kind of treatment, because there was a lot of emotion that night, and we needed to make sure that the EAP resources were focused on the people that were obviously really struggling. That's where my focus was that night. But I heard about this thing. It's not true. And again, Eric Carter is an incredible public servant. He is a dedicated veteran. He takes his job very seriously. But what people don't like is he wasn't part of the Friends and Family program. He just did his job. And he came up through the ranks and he worked his tail off. And now he's the first deputy. There was no official honor guard. My understanding is there was no official honor guard that night. There was, I'm going to choose my words carefully, I think well-meaning, but not well-organized group that wanted to hijack the procession, which would have meant that the family would have been delayed exponentially in getting to the morgue. And again, given the new restrictions that the new coroner has put in place, that wouldn't have been fair to them, and they may have lost an important window of time. So a call was made under those circumstances to focus on the family. Eric Carter made the right call. I support what he did, and I'm horrified that in this moment, people are trying to savage him for whatever agenda or purpose. And I would just caution you all, be careful. Be careful. Check your sources. Make sure they're accurate. Get the right context. Because I know firsthand, it's really hard when the media becomes ferocious in propagating a story that's just not true. And Eric Carter deserves our respect and our thanks for his service, both as a Marine and now as a police officer for many, many years.
Mayor, Craig Wall from August 7th, off-topic question.
No question from Pratt?
No question?
No question.
Okay, go ahead, Craig.
Do you have an update on the other officer's condition that you could share with us at this point?
Yeah, my information is as of yesterday afternoon, so I don't have information yet this morning. He is making small but positive progress. Again, I don't want to overshare because I think that really is his family's right. But given what we feared on Saturday night, he is getting great care. He's surrounded by a family that's loving and praying on him, and a lot of colleagues who are pulling for his recovery, and he is making some incremental progress.
And you were talking about respect earlier. Can you respond to the criticism that has been made of you that you forced your way upstairs to see that officer's family when his father
Craig,
asked
you know
not
what?
to?
I'm not going to respond to that. I don't force my way anywhere. And that's offensive, frankly, that you would ask me that question.
Heather Sharon with an off-topic.
I mean, just think about it, Craig, for 10 seconds. I just sat here and talked about the fact that we've got to be really careful, and you have to be really careful in your reporting and be responsible. And you just keep lobbing this nonsense that's offensive and insulting and really does a disservice to the moment that we're in. My role as mayor when I go to a hospital is to be there to show support, to make sure that city services are there and we're being responsive to the needs of whoever it is. So come on, give me a break. It's just, what else? What else are you going to mine from the bottom of the chum barrel? Come on, you're better than that. You're better than that. You're better than that. Go ahead, Heather.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.